You are listening to The Robert Scott Bell Show.
These days, it's more important than ever to know where our food and supplements come from. That's why, at Plus CBD Oil, we believe it is critical to manage every step of the supply chain process. It all starts with certified hemp seeds. Our hemp grows tall, like bamboo, and is harvested within 3 months. After harvest, the hemp is dried and sent to our CO2 extraction facility, where our raw formula is extracted. The extracted oil is then lawfully imported to our state-of-the-art in-house laboratory in San Diego, California. There, we convert our raw formula into our total plant complex and gold formula oils. Our oils are then used to formulate our award-winning Plus CBD oil product line. The products are then tested for cannabinoid content and the absence of harmful substances. But we go one step further. We then send our products to a third-party laboratory to verify concentration, quality, and safety. After that, the products have finished their journey and are ready to be shipped to your local health food store. Because at Plus CBD Oil, we believe how you do anything is how you do everything. That's why, from seed to shelf, we are committed to providing safe and effective hemp CBD products for you and your loved ones. It's our promise to you. Learn more about our commitment to full traceability at pluscbdoil.com.
The Robert Scott Bell Show.
I listen to get accurate, up-to-date information.
I've learned so much from him.
It is awesome. It's the best entertainment that I've found.
You rock the health world. Keep it up. I love you.
Now, the voice of health, freedom, and liberty, here's Robert Scott Bell.
Activity and disinformation. Russian military agency, Russia alone, Russian forces, President Putin's Russian expansionism, the Russians. The Russians. Russia, Russia's, not Russia, Russia, the Kremlin, the Kremlin, the Russian, Russia. When the president said, hey, Russia, if you're listening, they were listening. Russia.
Oh, my. It looks like Adam Schiff, the head guy on the impeachment thing now from the House to the Senate, has an obsession with Russia and helping us to navigate our way through this. Unfortunately, we got to talk a little bit about Adam Schiff. I apologize to everybody because it kind of makes my stomach a little bit upset. But Jonathan Emord will help us through it. Jonathan Emord, the FDA Dragon Slayer, Emord.com. Welcome back. Robert Scott Bell Show is on. Sacred Fire of Liberty begins now.
Yes, sir, Robert.
So 30 times in an opening, he mentions Russia. And it's like, you know, we hear this concept of the Brady Bunch when it was Marsha. He's Russia. What really is going on here? I mean, they've got 2 articles of impeachment. I don't know that either of them actually refer to Russia. Maybe I missed something somewhere. It was about obstruction of Congress and some kind of abuse of power. And what does he do? What is this guy doing? Scratching chalkboards so we don't listen?
He's a propagandist. He has some facts, none of which establish collusion, as we know from the Mueller report. But he takes disparate facts, which are not connected, and then presumes the connection. In other words, he lies that there is a connection or that there are facts that connect it. That is the essence of a propagandist. A propagandist starts with the answer. He knows what he wants the public to think. He then creates his story, his narrative, and when he misses a fact, he makes one up, and when he doesn't have a connection, he presumes it. And so, in short, like all good propagandists, Adam Schiff is a liar. And that's been established over and over again. Also, like most propagandists, that is, those who actually create the propaganda, he's unprincipled. So he doesn't care that he's harming the public, harming the Constitution, harming our way of governance. by lowering the bar for impeachment to a simple disagreement. He doesn't have to have a crime. All he has to do is politically want this man out of office. So hatred drives propaganda frequently, and that's exactly what drives him. He is viscerally against Donald Trump. He hates Donald Trump. You could never establish any success by the Trump administration that he would admit is a success. Instead, he falls back into this role of propagandist, and he weaves these tales and doesn't care if he omits facts, and doesn't care if he takes statements out of context, and doesn't care if he ruins people's reputations in the process who are innocent. He's intent on achieving his objective and doesn't care what happens to the nation, to anyone.
Jonathan, in a court trial, and again, I know there are some nuances to impeachment, but so there are some similarities too. If you're doing an opening argument as a lawyer to make your case, and you just bring in extraneous information and repeat, isn't a point where the judge goes, "What are you doing? What's the relevance of yelling Russia, Russia, Russia 30 times in this regard when you're trying to impeach on 2 articles, and you should say, these are articles, this is what we brought, let me back those up." Is there something that he's just trying to do to, maybe it's for the TV, maybe it's for just the people that are watching on MSNBC. I'm not sure what he's trying to achieve by doing it this way.
Well, like a novice attorney or one that is largely unaware of how a court operates, a novice attorney will exaggerate and state that his case will prove more than he has evidence to support. And Schiff is like that. As a propagandist, he's very much like that. And that runs the risk of alienating the jury and inducing objection from the other side and orders from the court to constrain an opening statement, which is an extraordinary thing in court, because most attorneys are well aware that you don't overpromise the jury what you can prove. You just limit your argument to what you can prove. What Adam Schiff is doing instead is promising a ironclad case with facts that are the opposite. And he doesn't articulate the facts. He emphasizes hyperbole. He emphasizes conclusory statements and judgments in his presentations. That's the mark of a person who does not have an ironclad case, who's lacks the facts which would otherwise speak for themselves in proof of guilt. He has no such evidence. So what does he do? He presumes its existence. He selectively excerpts from the record and ignores the countervailing evidence that disproves what he's excerpting, and he makes a claim for which there is no case. So I think what is happening is that he is effectively alienating those who might otherwise share some sympathies with the prosecution. And I think when it goes to Trump's side, you've got Alan Dershowitz and you've got Cipollone, and you have people there who are veteran prosecutors and lawyers who are quite skilled at dissecting evidence and exploding myths generated from hyperbole alone and no facts. So Schiff is going to have his head cut off. He is going to be shifting his head from his body to the floor, because the effect of the opposition is going to be overwhelming, I suspect.
Do you know any of the lawyers or anybody on on Trump's team here in defense on these impeachment claims?
I don't know them personally, but I know of them. And, Alan Dershowitz is extraordinarily talented constitutional lawyer and lawyer. And Cipollone is as well. Oh, excuse me. I do know Sukalo. His son, I've had interactions with his son.
Okay.
But they're very talented attorneys. I strongly suspect that they're going to just fillet Schiff. I mean, he's going to be roasted. In addition, he is indeed a necessary witness. I mean, Schiff interacted with the whistleblower, whose original complaint reads like it was written by the staff of Schiff and by attorneys for the whistleblower.
Yeah.
And the whistleblower, by all accounts, is a person who is a Democratic activist who was seeking ways to attack Donald Trump. So you have a partisan, not a person who's a victim, a typical whistleblower. You have a person who's doesn't even meet the definition of a whistleblower.
So how do you call Schiff to the stand, put him under oath? I mean, is that an unusual thing? The person managing the prosecution be called as a witness? Is that something they have to vote on as an entire Senate, or Justice Roberts gets to say, yeah, this guy we need to how does this work?
They'd have to have a vote to allow the witnesses by the Senate, and you have to be a majority vote of the Senate. But I strongly suspect that they may well forego the witnesses because it's a disaster for the Democrats more than the Republicans, in my view. I mean, the Democrats are crowing about and presuming, largely to try to tease out information, I suspect, that John Bolton will be a witness for them. Well, I don't know that to be the case at all. I strongly suspect that Bolton will be instructed by White House counsel that he must invoke executive privilege if asked certain kinds of questions. And I suspect that he'll be saying very little of any import if he is called. I do think Hunter Biden or Joe Biden or the whistleblower himself would be a disaster for them to call. And certainly Adam Schiff would look like a squirrel if he were forced to answer specific questions related to who he contacted, who his staff contacted, when did they contact them, were they participating, there's either he or his staff participating with counsel for the whistleblower in the writing of the complaint, drafting of the complaint, editing of the complaint. All of this would be making him blue in the gills and strangely expressive, well worth television viewing. But I don't think they'll go there. And the reason why I don't think they'll go to witnesses is because the case for impeachment on these two articles is vacuous. And that is, first, they're not crimes. And the Constitution plainly requires that crimes be the basis for removal from office. That part, the Senate trial, specifically focuses on crimes, treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. By definition, they are crimes. So the Congress served up two articles that don't define a crime. They don't define a crime at all. So on that basis alone, a motion to dismiss should be granted. So I think the president's lawyers will very ably make the case that the two articles of impeachment are incompetent as a basis for conviction and removal from office.
Well, and that's where I wanted to go today. So thank you for jumping into that, because I thought, you think strategy, do the Democrats have a strategy, a Schiff strategy, just to wave his arms and scream Russia, and somehow that's going to convince the Senate that, yeah, we should vote to remove him from office, and John Roberts and everybody else that's involved in this at this point? Or do they say, well, we're just going to score with our constituency, and then we can complain when they overturn or just dismiss the articles? They can say the fix was in, it was a partisan thing, the Republicans all voted, and but of course that was what happened actually in the House, where there was no bipartisanship, which again, based on the definitions of impeachment, the high crimes and misdemeanors, all of those things that were not taken into consideration. It seems clearly to me all about political motivation to move him out of office because they couldn't beat him in the election, and there are also stirrings on the Democratic side that they'd love to get rid of the Electoral College, which means, our presidents will be chosen by New York and California, basically, and everybody else can pound sand.
Yeah, progressives have never found themselves limited by the Constitution. They simply don't believe that the Constitution applies to them or to what they want to do. But when it comes to this impeachment matter, I think Schiff's motivation is, like all good propagandists, to create an effective conspiracy theory because they all know that the probability of a 2/3 vote for conviction and removal is zero or very nearly zero. So barring evidence coming from space aliens deposited into the brains of all the senators by beam, what we are likely to see is the Senate voting with some Democrats who will vote with the Republicans, I suspect, against any conviction and removal from office. So as a result, all this bloviating out of Adam Schiff is really just propagandizing, because the only value to Pelosi at all from this thing is calling rights afterwards, saying, well, the president was impeached. He was very bad. He was a very, very bad man. And he was impeached. And the reasons why he is a very bad man may be unclear, but that's because they wouldn't let us present the evidence of how very bad he was. So the evidence that you don't know and that we know really does exist was never allowed to reach the public. And so this is a massive censorship conspiracy.
But that's easy to counter by saying, if you had it, why didn't you bring it out in the House to include it in the articles in the first place?
Right. Furthermore, they have absolutely no evidence that any of the people they wish to call would say a single thing contrary to Donald Trump on the evidence. That is to say, none of the people they wish to call has ever stated publicly something that could be used as proof necessary to establish a crime, right? The money was actually given within the time period required by statute. So the money's being withheld was a delay in its payment, but not a illegal delay. It didn't exceed the time that was required for the money to be given to the Ukraine. The Ukrainian president and those in the Ukrainian government who were in the top echelons next to the president have all said they were under no pressure. They don't know what they're talking about pressure. They say they weren't subject to a quid pro quo, that they were given the missiles they wanted and they wanted the money, but they didn't understand at the time that the money was being withheld from them and the money was actually given to them. And they have no beef whatsoever with Donald Trump.
No, the beef we should have is we don't often have a legitimate discussion about foreign aid, taking money from U.S. taxpayers and just sending them out to various people and buying them off. That
even if you were to accept the Democrats' narrative that Donald Trump wanted to influence the 2020 election by withholding money from the Ukraine, even if you accept that, that's not a crime because nothing happened. They got the money. There was no interference with the 2020 election by the Ukraine or anybody else as a result of withholding money. There was no understanding that was the money being withheld was for a purpose to interfere with the election as opposed to investigation of political corruption. The fact that someone commits a crime like Biden or his son, or engages in a conflict of interest that's so gross you can vomit immediately upon hearing of it, that is proof of corruption. But the proof of corruption is not proof of an interference with the 2020 election. The mere fact that you have some evidence of corruption, it goes to the Attorney General. In the call itself, the president is talking about Attorney General Barr getting that evidence, and he's talking about talking to the former governor or former mayor of New York, Rudy Giuliani, who is his own personal attorney about it. But that doesn't link to, gee, we're using this information as part of evidence that we will put to use in a campaign against Joe Biden. Now, even if he had used the evidence against Joe Biden, so what? That's still not proof of an effort to thwart the election as opposed to reveal information that the voting public may wish to know. The thwarting of election comes when you change a vote that's in favor of one candidate to another by manipulating a voting machine, or where you deceive people from going to a voting precinct because they go to another area because you've said that's where it is through a false campaign of some sort, or where you use false information given to you by a foreign government, like Hillary Clinton attempted to do with the dossier, totally false, to use to influence government to take an action against a candidate and then a president. That is a violation of federal law for which they aren't being prosecuted. But did Trump do any of that? No.
No. Trump is out there saying the Democrats' impeachment arguments are loaded with lies. He actually, I think I heard him say, he's like, man, I wish I was just sitting there in front of Schiff as he's making these arguments. And I just want to hold a mirror up to Schiff. I don't know if he can see himself. Maybe he's a vampire and he can't.
Now,
and maybe
may well be guilty of violating federal law if it could be shown that, for example, Schiff colluded with the whistleblower and actually induced the whistleblower to make statements for which neither he nor the whistleblower had any evidence, and make a false charge, which indeed it is. The actual complaint, there are parts of that complaint for which there is to this day no evidence, and so it's an effort to besmirch or challenge a president based on false information. All right. Well, if that's part of a conspiracy to defraud, that is, if they knowingly work together to file a false complaint, well, that's a crime. Okay, so Schiff has shown himself willing to say that collusion existed and that he had proof positive in his own possession, he said to the media, of Donald Trump's collusion with the Russians. Now, he's personally offended by the fact that he didn't have the evidence and he was called out on it, and he couldn't produce any. So that's why Russia is one of his favorite terms in this thing. He's trying to make it look like he really had something when he never has had anything. And the guy is a buffoon. I mean, he's a clown.
Can we get a hold? What? Oh yeah, no. I was just going to say, can we get a hold of his high school yearbook and see if he was voted most likely to be possessed, whether it be by space aliens or demons, and maybe his constituents could re-vote on him and vote for an exorcism. I'm not a priest or anything, but my gosh, this guy.
I remember in the old days when they tried to say that Obama was not a citizen of the United States. Now that was a bit of a strange conspiracy, but I think that Adam Schiff is not a citizen of the United States. He's a citizen of some foreign planet. He's from another.
I thought you were going to say he was a citizen of some foreign appliance somewhere because he's being operated by 5G, and programmed. Russia.
Remember the B-52 song, I'm from Planet Claire? It came from there.
Dude, I didn't.
That's his theme song. He's not from this planet. That explains everything.
Yeah, no, it does explain a lot, and I'm just very impressed that the B-52s and the lyrics. That's awesome. Jonathan Emord, my brother, my buddy, hey, look, I also want to say while I'm thinking about it, the Health Freedom Expo coming up in October. I know we've got many months away still, but I want to think about and thank Julie Whitman-Klein and the folks from Trinity School of Natural Health for their support of this show and Health Freedom and Jonathan Emord. And all the things we get to do together. I watch, and I try not to actually. It's sort of disgusting to watch what's going on in this impeachment trial thus far with Schiff. But I try to take it to other places of empowerment because you kind of feel disempowered. I mean, we hope that in the end justice will be served, and they'll go. You might not like Trump, but articles of impeachment, you got to do better than that. Hey, how about arguing on the merits of your views and beliefs as Democrats, that you have a better idea for the country, and take it to the voters. But then they say, no, we can't win. So our strategy is to say that Russia colluded. They colluded with Russia. I mean, this is such a weak thing. And I think even people, that are Democrats or have been lifelong Democrats, we've seen a lot with the hashtag walkaway campaign started by a liberal Democrat, Brandon Strzok, who said enough of this hatred. They're starting to look at each other and going, this is not what I thought it was. And so there is a wake up happening. So I think there's an increasing level of desperation to do the things Schiff and others are doing to say, I don't think we can beat this guy. So this is our only opportunity. Let's throw everything on the wall. Maybe it'll work.
Well, I think it's telling that here we are 9 months away from the election. And among the things that Adam Schiff has said is something to the effect that we can't wait for the election because we can't leave it to the people to determine what's wrong here and whether there is anything wrong here. We have to do that for them. We have to make a decision ourselves. We have to remove them from office. So what he's saying is part of this elitism, this extraordinary arrogance that the election of 2016 is not legitimate because you voted for a candidate we didn't want to win, and you voted against a candidate we did want to win. So we've worked since he was inaugurated, even before then, to try to find a basis to impeach him because we just don't like this guy. And that's our prerogative. We have the power to do it. We're doing it. That's our prerogative. And the nation can just, really go its own way. We aren't going to allow you, the American people, to decide who you want to be president 9 months from now. We want to decide who is the president by getting rid of this man who you voted for. This is authoritarian elitism, but it's not a stranger to people like Adam Schiff. No. He's a manipulator. He is a person who uses power to achieve his own ends, regardless of what limitations exist in the law. He has no respect for the rule of law. He professes hypocritically an adoration for the very Constitution that he despises. I mean, he despises limitations on his power. That's what he despises. Any part of the Constitution that says that he can't rule, he really dislikes that. He wants to use his power to get his way, and it doesn't matter if the American people disagree. It doesn't matter if they would vote Donald Trump back in. He will pursue this agenda. He will chronically pursue it because he has the ability to pursue it. Now, that's an abuse of power. That's a person who doesn't respect the limitations on his power. It's not an abuse of power for Donald Trump to confer with a foreign head of state in order to ferret out corruption, particularly in a head of state whose immediate predecessor, was steeped in corruption, and a state that we have given massive amounts of money to in arms. We have an obligation. Indeed, there's a statutory obligation for Donald Trump to make sure that there is no corruption in the expenditure of the resources of this country when we give foreign aid. And that's part of the normal process of this administration, not just with the Ukraine, but with every other government that money goes to. We're trying to find out if they're taking that money and putting it to corrupt uses. You've got a government in the Ukraine that was so steeped in corruption. That's how Burisma happened. That's how Joe Biden's son got involved. He was able to get in there with no experience whatsoever because Burisma was headed by the former head of the country and was a corrupt institution from the start. And all these people made hay because of political connections. They wanted the vice president's son involved. They used that as leverage. And Joe Biden was gleeful to see that his son was making money for nothing. And, Joe Biden's a fraud and his son's a fraud. And that's all well and good. But that story doesn't come out. And Adam Schiff says, oh, no, that's not relevant. No, that's not relevant. And then the idiot gets up there and talks about Burisma. In his speech, he mentions it. So in court rules, I mean, if you make
you made it relevant.
Yeah. So then now, if you went to witnesses, they've got a strong basis of relevance now. So yeah, it's all, it's a disgrace for this country. And if they were successful, then the bar for impeachment would be so low that anytime you disagreed with a president, the Congress would exercise that power, and that would make the president a very tame critter indeed. He wouldn't be a functional part of the separation of powers anymore. The president of the United States would be a mere patsy, much like a parliamentary type of government. That's
a really good point. If they succeed, then the next time the Republicans have a one-vote majority in the House, bingo, bango, bongo, you got a Democrat president, automatic impeachment, and it's just going to recycle. And then what's the point? Now you've got an overt crumbling of whatever is left of constitutional governance here in the United States. Now, Jonathan has written books, including The Rise of Tyranny, to help explain what kind of government is operating now, not one that our founders necessarily left for us, although we'd love to see it reactivated. And one of the books he wrote, Restore the Republic, talks about some of the ways that people can do it. And I'm anxiously awaiting the next book, which goes more into the history of how we got here with the oligarchy, progressivism through the last 100+ years. So we'll talk about that as well. And when we come back from this break, in the show notes, you'll see articles about grappling with ethical decisions on vaccines. I want to talk to Jonathan about that, as well as new bills to keep an eye on. Interesting one in New York where they're going to try to reinstitute religious liberty when you got vaccine mandates. That's interesting. So we'll talk about that and a whole lot more. You're listening to the Robert Scott Bell Show right here on Natural News Radio. Thanks to Mike Adams, the Health Ranger, and many other outlets around the world. We appreciate you, and we appreciate Trinity School of Natural Health. Back after this.
All across the country, people are waking up and searching for answers for a better, healthier lifestyle. They're looking for leaders, people who will help show them the steps needed to achieve these goals. Trinity's Health Coach program is the perfect program to gain the knowledge needed to help motivate, support, and empower others on their path to a healthy and happier lifestyle. This course will teach you how to evaluate client needs and make safe, effective lifestyle recommendations. Core concepts of human body systems and how their functionality can be optimized through lifestyle changes. Supporting natural health practices, including pH balancing, Bach flowers, physical observations, and iridology. And coaching fundamentals, legalities of practice, and business strategies to get you started running your own natural health business. If your goal is helping others on their journey to a healthy lifestyle, Trinity's Health Coach program is the perfect program for you. If you have any questions or feel like this is the program for you, please send us an email or give us a call and get started on your path to transform the world.
All right, each and every week we do the Sacred Fire of Liberty edition of the Robert Scott Bell Show with Jonathan Emord. We tend to go into what I call political healing topics, sometimes economic healing as well, and we do tackle health freedom and health and healing as well. And Jonathan has been part of nutritional supplements for many years in defending companies who dared to put products on the market that didn't harm anyone, yet the Fear and Death Administration said, hey, you can't say that about that. And despite the fact that, there's so much science supporting, for instance, the utilization of selenium as a preventive method and a reversal method relating to cancer, it didn't matter that you've won 7-8 times. The FDA still puts the fear of them into natural products retailers, much less those that make those products. And so I don't know about the ethics of denying people the freedom to know things. I mean, that seems to be a very unethical thing to do, right? And our bureaucratic oligarchy doesn't have, I don't believe, an ethical bone in their body.
Well, the administrative state operates on selective preferences. That is, they pick winners and losers. So while they will look away when Bayer Aspirin advertises its aspirin regimen to reduce the risk of a second heart attack, they will seize immediately this dietary supplement company that dare says that antioxidant vitamins will reduce your risk of cancer. So there's a purposeful effort to choose winners and losers. The drug companies win, everybody else loses. But it's just the way it is. And the reason for that is that it's corrupt. At root, it's corrupt. The FDA is basically the patsy of the drug industry, always has been since the late 60s. Mm-hmm. And before then, it's always been, even all the way back to old Wiley, the first person to do the food and drug shtick. He was, favoring certain parties and disfavoring others, all based on some wacky theories he had. But the basic thing is that you can't create a beast like that out of this progressive soup, which the progressives understood that they wanted, the popular progressive view favored these things for what? Good food, protect, make safe drugs, make clean air, make labor safe, make labor people who work receive higher wages. Those are the platitudes that led to the political movements that went to Washington to make legislation possible. But when you get into the sausage making of Congress, where they make legislation, the primary movers who they're responding to are the industries themselves that are affected. And those industries universally succeed either in the legislation itself or immediately after it in the administrative agencies in capturing them and getting their way. And usually the legislation ends up with a cartelization effect. It creates a monopoly in favor of the big guys, a very market concentration that they couldn't achieve in a competitive market. They get from these agencies and from the legislation. Whether you're Harvey Wiley at the or very origins of the Food and Drug Administration, or you're the head of the Securities and Exchange Commission, or you're the head of the Federal Radio Commission, then the Federal Communications Commission. You look at the history, and it's all one whereby parties create a cartelization effect, three major national networks out of what was previously a large body of competing independents. You end up with the Federal Radio Commission and cutting out over 600 broadcasters in one fell swoop, limiting the market to Westinghouse and ended up being CBS and ABC and NBC. And that goes on for decades. And they reap windfall profits because the networks were predominant, cutting out all forms of competition. And then another technology comes along and blows the government plan. And this is the history of the evolution of the administrative state. The administrative state is largely a fraud in the sense that it adopts a public interest veneer. And then beneath that veneer, the real work is done in determining winners and losers, who's going to get the monopoly lion's share and who's not. And that's the way it's always been. And the poor civil servants are really pawns in the political of the leaders of these things.
And this is the danger. Our founders warned us about centralizing power, and that's at the federal level, but we can also argue on the state level where we see these things violate individual liberty, family sanctity, sovereignty, etc. And, nothing more so than in the medical realm, making choices about our health and health care. And, the vaccine issue is front and center right now as we see they have, leveled this issue up to the point where it overwhelms any rational discussion about health itself under the guise of public health, which I've argued is ultimately a collectivist ideal the way they're selling it. I've got nothing against having clean water, municipal systems clean up. Well, that's great. But it's to the benefit of every individual who drinks that water, who's in that, not a global mass of people. One by one, we talk about illness or health. And now the vaccine issue. Very much a collectivist argument to promote it in violation of anybody's individual liberty, religious liberty, etc. Here's an interesting article, and y'all can check it out at robertscottbell.com from UNLV, grappling with ethical decisions of vaccines. This medical ethicist by the name of Dr. Johann Bester, and he's at UNLV. He is making an argument. And if I move down in this article to the key areas under vaccine ethics, he says one is to consider it from the perspective of vaccination being a medical decision where a parent and physician together try to decide what is best for the child patients. Okay, so they say, all right, you guys get to decide. That's cool. I'm all about that. If you have a doctor, if you don't, that's fine too. But he's now going to another area in the next paragraph, and it says this: another way of thinking about vaccine ethics is to ask what is owed children by society. This is a new perspective, he says, I've brought to the vaccine ethics in my work on these issues, starting with the moral obligation society owes children, that might have been a Freudian slip, rather than starting with the question of what is owed to parents. I argue that society is obligated to protect children against preventable diseases that can impact the well-being of children, and therefore that society has an obligation to guarantee measles vaccinations for children. Whoa, where did you leap from that to that? Well, it's because when you start with this concept of we own your children, then why should the parent have any say? Or the doctor, if you disagree with the doctor, if your greater good, which has been brought about, Jonathan, to your point, by the capturing of central bureaucracies, by the industries they are regulating, then saying this is so important, everybody's going to die if you don't implement it. This is the greater good. This is the justice. This is the ethical consideration. Now you abandon any pretense of government being a servant and basically recognizing that each individual is sovereign in the eyes of God, and you become their God in government. And then you say, we own your kids. You can believe what you want to believe, but sorry, you can't say no anymore. We're coming in to mandate it based on our statement that measles vaccine is way better than getting measles. There's no even discussion of the fact that we got measles throughout history and we survived it and we were stronger and better. And even in the scientific journals, it shows benefits that you're not getting from vaccination. And I can go on, and I do, but I want to let you in on the ethical discussion. They're not even talking morality here, but ethics.
Well, this authoritarian view is at the heart of progressive thinking. This is classic progressive thinking, dates all the way back in this country to the 1800s after the Civil War. And the notion is that there is a collective good, that those in power and those who are quote unquote experts get to define what that good is. And when an individual dissents, that individual is to be punished. And that individual is to be prosecuted. In this instance, they define the collective good as ensuring 100% vaccination of children. They say the collective good is that children be disease-free. This is the public interest. And the way to ensure that, they say, is to have mass vaccination, to compel all children to be vaccinated, as the state exercises its parens patriae function of being the ultimate parent. This is Hegelian thought. It dates all the way back to the 1800s. Hegelian thought whereby the collective has rights and the individual is only has rights to the extent that it serves the collective, that there's no higher calling than to serve the collective. Now, the problem with that is that it's fundamentally at odds with the very foundation of our Constitution. Our Constitution is based on the concept that the individual is sovereign, based on the idea that it is the duty of government to protect the rights of the individual against the majority, against the state. And so when you have a question of freedom of choice, that freedom exists and is defended by the Constitution against majoritarian values. You burden the majority to protect the rights of the minority under Madison's concept of individual liberty. You end up with, for example, there may be neighbors of people who are Amish, who think the Amish are a cult, who think that those people who segregate themselves from the rest of society are a bane of society because they are not treating their children with an immersion into the rest of society. They aren't allowing their children to receive the benefit of progressive thinking, to be vaccinated or otherwise, to be attending public schools, to be made into model citizens. That under this theory, that the public good must always trump the private right, then you take away the right to dissent that the exercised by the Amish. You compel them to be a part of society. You say that they're abusing their children by not letting their children watch television or use the internet or go to a public school.
Or not give them candy at Halloween.
So then all Christian scientists in the country are now to be beaten over the head and dragged into the hospital and be given modern medical treatment because they believe against the receipt of modern medical treatment. They believe in healing through other means. So everyone who is not a part of the allopathic medical community in toto is now going to be shorn of their homeopathic remedies, are going to be shorn. This is what this thinking leads to. So if you accept on one level, like, for example, Obamacare, that you no longer have a right to choose whether to have insurance, you must have insurance to live. This notion, it leads to an endless parade of government takeovers. It leads to us saying, well, no, you can't buy that kind of a car because the risk of an accident is too great in that kind of car. No, you can't ride a motorcycle, you fool. The motorcycle is inherently dangerous. No, you can't take your children to vacation in these parts of the world because there's a chance that they'll get sick. No, you can't have them go to the seashore and get into the ocean because there's sharks there. No, you can't look askance in one way or another because you're violating our perception of what's the public good. You must look a certain way. You must behave a certain way. You must believe certain things and you must do certain things. This is where it all leads. When you end up with a Mike Bloomberg world, you don't have soda in it, and everyone takes their sugar on the underground.
Yes.
All of this leads to the effects of prohibition. When the progressives succeeded in getting prohibition in the United States, did they end the use of alcohol? No, they just
went underground. Yeah, exactly.
People will be free. People will be free. It was the purpose of our Constitution to say this, that so long as you don't violate the rights of another person, you can do whatever you want. That's what the Constitution was meant to do. You don't violate the rights of another person. You don't deprive them of their life, liberty, or property. You can do what you want.
But Jonathan, they are falsely claiming, those of us who don't adopt vaccination as sacrament in their church, that we are endangering them. So they're trying to make the argument that we are just by our very existence endangering them because we don't accept a product made by man, mandated into existence via the oligarchy, captured by the very industry that it's supposed to regulate, that can result in harm and or death, and that has no liability, that could not be sold on the free market because no one would be stupid enough to take it. That's why they begged the government, and eventually convinced them in the 80s to release them of liability, because people were suing them because their product was so dang dangerous.
Right. So you're well and your child is well, but you must be vaccinated. You pose no provable threat to society at all based on disease, but you must be vaccinated. This is the authoritarian drive. I mean, the authoritarian drive leads to deprivation of your freedom of choice, even in the absence of proof of harm. They rely on these generalized public health statistics. That is to say that although we cannot prove in your individual case that you pose a threat to anyone, in the aggregate, we know that if there's a disease, it may be carried by people who are well beforehand. And there's a diminished likelihood of it being carried by those who receive a vaccination. Therefore, based on these generalized statistics, we're taking away your entire freedom. Now, there are, when you look at constitutional rights and the balance that sometimes has to take place, there are obvious less restrictive alternatives to compelling you to receive an agent into your bloodstream that you don't want. And that is to say, okay, look, we have an epidemic in school A. Your child is well and goes to school A. We can show that there's a high probability that sooner or later your child will likely get the disease. We don't want that to happen. We say that that's not a good thing. Okay, that's fine. You have a public school. You can think that. But why go to excluding the child from the school? Why not give him his classes by Skype at home?
Well, we know because it isn't an agenda of concern for that child, or this. It's really an agenda of.
The goal is not really public health. The goal is not really to ensure compliance with their mandates. What the real goal is control. It is
control. Yes,
liberty. That's the real goal.
And this is where I say, how far is progressivism today from communism in reality? When you are telling us all that the state owns us, but maybe we're not saying that, but okay, if you can force vaccinate my child, you have claimed ownership over them. The parent has no authority to say it. You have no religious liberty. And we got boneheads like this UNLV professor saying that, it's based on herd immunity, which is not even validated in the scientific literature outside of a real naturally acquired infection that's wild, as opposed to what they do via vaccination. And they say, you're riding, you're coasting on other people's vaccination. He makes stuff up. 95% need to be vaccinated to protect the 5%. But there's no such thing as 100% successful vaccination, so that there's no such thing. You can't ever achieve herd immunity via vaccination is my point. And so their arguments are facetious. They're made up. They're based on fiction, pharmaceutical fictions, and the goal is not, as you said, public health. It's ownership. It's control. It's the tyranny of the majority. It's duping people and believing democracy is a good idea. when really it's a dangerous idea, and our founders knew it, and that it would lead to that tyranny of the majority. The majority say, hey, yeah, no, we want what stuff from government. Let's vote it in. And the individual is the one that is sacrificed and suffers. And that is the thing that our founders most abhorred, this idea that you could take the individual and force them to do what the majority wanted them to do. And you've said it well so many times over the years. And there's some interesting good news here. I just want to bring this up because we only have a few more minutes left. Some bills that are being forwarded in New York to reinitialize religious freedom to say no to vaccines. There is a bill, let's see, this is New York's Senate Bill 7362, and it says provides a religious exemption from vaccination requirements for school attendance. So somebody's trying to right the wrong there. In Oklahoma, there's a bill, immunizations, prohibiting denial of personal exemption in certain circumstances. It's very interesting, this. And then a bill out of Arizona, which is the most intriguing to me, Jonathan. Check this out. They're saying, notwithstanding any other law, a person who is required to receive an immunization for any purpose, including as a condition of employment, school attendance, or obtaining any license, certification, or degree, may claim an exemption from the requirements if there is not a vaccine that has been approved by the U.S. FDA based on these conditions or criteria. And then he goes in and lists, Jonathan, this is very crafty, all of the things that must be achieved by the FDA through testing against inert placebo, on and on, all the things that haven't been done and will never be done. And it's brilliant. It's like, yeah, when you do that and that's, yeah, then fine. Band-Aid all you want. I just love the craftiness of that Arizona proposed bill.
Yeah, Bloomberg would spend a few billion on that one.
My God.
Pay for all the testing then.
Right, yeah. So we have to make sure you actually do the tests you say you've done, which they're never going to do, because what do we know? Factually, you cannot inject the substances that are in a vaccine and expect everyone to be just fine. The same thing. No one gets hurt. It's ridiculous. It's ludicrous. It's or anti-scientific on its face to make those claims. And those that still claim the science is settled, vaccines are safe and effective, they're perpetrating mantras as dumb as Schiff is going into impeachment saying Russia, Russia, Russia.
Yes. Well, Schiff has many job opportunities to propagandize. I mean, he could be working for the Department of Health and Human Services. He could be working for the CDC. I mean, there are many opportunities for Schiff. He doesn't have to know anything. All he has to do is communicate platitudes that are propagandistic. And he has proclivity to make up facts. So that really comes in handy in the propaganda mills, regardless of what agency he works for. So progressivism lives on in the bizarre, alien-headed Adam Schiff.
Mm-hmm. Oh, by the way, if Julie Whitman-Klein is watching us now, we love her and the whole family at Trinity School of Natural Health and the Health Freedom Expo. We talk about it all the time here, of course. Jonathan and I had discussed on the air, I'm just doing this offhand. I could pick up the phone and call her, but I do need to. We discussed the idea of a kind of a celebrity charity boxing match or exhibition at the Health Freedom Expo this year. Just think about it, contemplate on it, pray on it, see if that's something that could be fun to do. Jonathan and I are game. We're up for it. That could be fun too. So we're just throwing out ideas of, man, people will be coming from everywhere. Boxing's big. By the way, did you see, I think there was a welterweight championship bout last weekend. I think it was Saturday night. I don't know if you watched this. There was a guy from, I think it was from Philadelphia, against a guy from the Dominican Republic. The Philadelphia guy was the champion. The Dominican Republican guy was a challenger. And he won in a major upset in the 5th round. And guess what? My boxing coach was his trainer right there in the ring. And I'm like, dude, I got some good training. I need to get back with that, but I have to go back to Florida. He was a national champion in Puerto Rico many years ago. I was so proud, so happy. It was so cool to watch.
Very cool, Robert. Super cool.
So, yeah, Luis, you know who you are. Congratulations on getting the belt back, being a champion again that you are. That was very, very cool. So, all right, Jonathan, we got a couple of more minutes. I've got Dr. Sherri Tenpenny waiting to join us. We've got V-Science Bites. We're going to do the shingles shot. You know, it turns out, guess what? The shingles shot is meaning rather than preventing shingles, it's people that are getting this are getting more shingles. Are you surprised? Another goof by the pharmaceutical church?
I think that there ought to be a Schiff shingles shot then. They ought to name the shingles shot after Schiff.
Schiff shingles shot. That's classic. So Dr. Sherri Tenpenny was with us at the last Health Freedom Expo. I hope that she can attend again in October back in Chicago, because we have a great time whenever we get together. And I think Dr. Tenpenny was just on with our friend Del Bigtree on the High Wire, so we'll get a little bit of bonus information about how that went as we launch into the next V-Science Bite. So, Jonathan, any other things we should look out for this week? I think tomorrow maybe the Republican defense or the defense for Trump might be hitting the airwaves, and it might be more interesting.
I think that might be Saturday.
Saturday?
But,
okay.
Yeah, but it'll be interesting. I think they'll take apart what was presented very effectively. So.
Excellent. So Emord.com, all the books. I had your book yesterday at a lecture I did on homeopathy for one of the local Healing Strong groups, The Rise of Tyranny. Showed everybody, you got to know how we got here, but we're going to learn more about that, even that history, with your new book. Again, what's the title of the upcoming book?
Beyond Constitutional Limits.
Beyond Constitutional Limits. We're all looking out for that. Can't wait. And I want my galley copy. I can't wait, my friend.
All right.
All right, Jonathan Emord, thank you for being here. Sacred Fire of Liberty each and every week. Go to robertscottbell.com for archives. And we're going to be joined momentarily by our good friend, Dr. Sherri Tenpenny, with more V-Science Bites, Shingles Shot Part 2. And I can't wait. Remember this, in the meantime, that the power to heal is yours.
The Robert Scott Bell Show. The Robert Scott Bell Show.
Have you ever watched a movie with superheroes and villains? If so, you already understand the science of drinking hydrogen-enriched water and how to unlock true health. Allow me to explain. In our bodies, we have a natural struggle between superheroes and villains, with molecular hydrogen being the superhero and oxidative stress the villain. So how does knowing that give you the tools to unlock true health? Your body is naturally designed to fight oxidative stress through specific bacteria in the gut that creates hydrogen on their own. Pretty awesome, right? So why does this matter? Well, in most people, the hydrogen-creating bacteria is gone, and cancer and disease soon follow. So the real question is, why aren't we trying to fix this every day? Well, the answer is simple. It's hard. Even the most healthy of individuals who biohack take months or years to achieve this balance. But how do we get there without taking months or even years? After years of study and development, we discovered and designed the perfect technology that made it all possible. We call this technology Echo H2 Water. Within minutes of drinking hydrogen-rich water from our Echo Hydrogen water machines, you are back in control, balanced, and feeling amazingly hydrated and healthy. Having your own Echo Hydrogen water machine is kinda like having your own team of superheroes on call, always available to fight the villains in your body. Pretty cool, right? But don't just take our word for it. Get your Echo H2 water machine today and quickly bring your body into balance with hydrogen.
The Robert Scott Bell Show.
I listen to get accurate, up-to-date information.
I've learned so much from him.
It is awesome. It's the best entertainment that I've found.
You rock the health world. Keep it up. I love you.
Now, the voice of health, freedom, and liberty, here's Robert Scott Bell.
Commences now. I want to welcome everybody joining us from the High Wire with Del Bigtree. And interestingly enough, she's gotten warmed up because she was on the show today. Our good friend, Dr. Sherri Tenpenny, joins us for some V-Science Bites. And once again, brought to you by much gratitude to Julie Whitman Klein and family from Trinity School of Natural Health. They've been great supporters of this message, and we continue to support the education that we feel would be much better served if doctors got real nutrition. So, Dr. Tenpenny, Shingles Part 2. I know we've got to revisit a little bit from last week with the notes that you put together, which are phenomenal, by the way, but you look back and you say, hey, maybe I could rework them just a little bit.
Yeah, so let's just go back and kind of review this whole thing about shingles. I mean, where does shingles come from? It comes from having chicken pox and then not being re-exposed to kids, grandkids, neighbors, school kids with chicken pox, so that it keeps your long-term immunity intact. So as your natural innate immunity begins to wane, any residual virus that may have been in your dorsal ganglion roots in your spine starts to pop out and then kind of grow. It kind of propagates along nerves called dermatomes. And that's why shingles is extremely painful. It's always, like 99% of the time, is unilateral. So if you get a really painful, itching, burning unilateral rash just about anywhere on your body, that could be diagnosed as shingles. And historically, we only saw that in immunosuppressed type of people, the elderly who may be not so well and on a lot of different medications. You saw it a lot in diabetics. You saw it in people who had cancer. But now we're seeing it in children, and we're seeing it in all different age groups. So we have changed the complete dynamics of this virus. And since the herpes simplex virus, the herpes zoster virus, the humans are the only known host. How the vaccine actually worked, quote unquote, is that if you were exposed to someone with chickenpox within, say, 6 to 8 months of when you've had the vaccine, it stopped the transmission of the virus. So as the virus stopped the propagation, stopped the transmission, it died out because it needed to have a new host, the next person who was susceptible to propagate in. Mm-hmm. And so that is why we don't see so much of chickenpox anymore, and why even the idea of wanting to find a chickenpox party is very, very difficult, because the only virus that's still out in circulation is the vaccine strain virus, which doesn't cause the same type of infection. You can get an outbreak of what looks like chickenpox from someone who shed, but it's a different virus. It's vaccine strain attenuated virus. It is not the real virus that would be out there in the wild. So you just don't see it that much. And then the one main study that we talked about the last time, the shingles prevention study, which actually showed that it really didn't prevent it. And when I was looking back, even when we were going through this during the show the last time, the way that it was kind of set up, I mean, you had sort of a confused look on your face. And when I read it, it looked kind of confusing. And so after the show, I went back and I pulled the full text of the article and I rewrote the show notes for everybody. So there's a new PDF file. And I just want to go over it just a little bit, because it really, the way that it explains it a little bit, in this shingles prevention study, there were about 3,800 adults, 60 years of age and older, that were given Zostavax, which is the shingles vaccine. And they defined burden of illness as a measure of severity and the duration of pain. So what they were actually looking for wasn't really, did the shingles vaccine stop you from getting shingles? But if you did get shingles, how long did it last and how severe was the pain? So it said that the shingles vaccine, if you actually got shingles, even though you'd had the vaccine, that it decreased the burden of illness, meaning the severity and the duration, by 61%. Which means 40% of the time it did nothing. You had the same amount of pain and itching and burning as if you had not had the vaccine at all. And then it looked at the overall, how did it decrease the incidence of post-herpetic neuralgia, which is you get the shingles, and then that shingles virus stays in that nerve forever. And it's a completely debilitating type of pain. And what the study showed, it reduced it by about 2/3, 66%. It only brought down your incidence of getting the shingles by 50%. And then 60% of that 50% is the actual numbers that showed that it reduced the incidence of post-herpetic neuralgia. And that was 65% if you were between 60 and 70, and it's about the same if you were over 70. But here's where the rubber meets the road on this vaccine. It reduced the incidence of shingles overall by about 51%. So you got the shot, you had a 50-50 deal of whether you were going to get the shingles or not. It was a little bit better if you were younger, if you were between 60 and 70, maybe 64%, maybe 60-40, but 40% you were going to get it anyways. And if you were going to get it anyways, or if you were not going to get it anyways, was it the shot, or was it your body was healthy and you had plenty of vitamin C on board? But if you were over 70, the older you were, it only decreased the incidence of getting shingles by about 37%. So you get the shot, you take on all the risk of the shot, meaning that you could get all the side effects and different things from the vaccine, and it's only going to decrease the incidence by about 35%.
Yeah, and of course they're targeting the elders of the elders, and they're having to rethink it if they're honest about what they're finding out about the shot itself. And again, I remember having chickenpox as a child. A little annoying, but nobody was concerned I was going to die. Similar to measles in the back in the day when it was a joke. And I was able to get my kids real chickenpox and measles years ago.
Your kids are a little older. How old are your kids now?
14 and 20.
Yeah. So see, that makes sense. I mean, look at 14 more years of giving kids 2 chickenpox vaccines, and they introduced the second one before you started school because the first one was such an abject failure. Yeah. One wasn't enough. Oh, so instead of saying this doesn't work, let's just put this on the shelf and walk away. No, it doesn't work. It doesn't prevent chickenpox. So let's just give another one. Now they're talking about a third measles vaccine. It's just like,
where does it end?
Exactly.
Well, it ends here on V-Science Bites with Dr. Sherri Tenpenny. Giving small bites so you can remember to bite them in the behind. And if you go to the Robert Scott Bell Show notes, the embedded PDF, which Super Don's going to be loading up the new one that from last week, Dr. Tenpenny updated. And if you go to the top of the page, sorry to make everybody dizzy, there's V-Science Bites. You just click that link and you'll see each time that we've done a V-Science Bites together on the many different topics. They're there in archive form and exclusively available through Brighteon, our buddy Mike Adams, the Health Ranger, with Natural News being under a cyber attack right now because of the bold assertions he's making in the news through there. So we have ways where you can learn more about the things that we do here, and Dr. Sherri Tenpenny does all the time, even when we're not doing V-Science Bites together.
So what we're going to do today is I just thought it was really important to go back in time. And the take-home message from that is the shingles shot prevents shingles about 50-50. If you're and the older you get, the less it prevents you from getting shingles. It just keeps going down. So, maybe you weren't going to get it anyways, but now you've taken on all the risk of the vaccine with all the ingredients that we talked about, all the different ingredients the last time. So today there's just 2 major studies because they were big that I'm bringing up today. One is a full text article from 2013. So it's pretty recent, published in the PLOS journal. And the title of the article is Herpes Zoster Vaccine Effectiveness Against Incidence of Herpes Zoster and Post-Herpetic Neuralgia in the Older Population. So this just sort of got one more big study because they looked at charts of over 760,000 people over 65 years of age, and they separated them into 2 groups: the ones that had gotten the vaccine and the ones that hadn't gotten the vaccine. And they looked at this between 2007 and 2009. And the result was that the incidence rate of shingles in immunocompetent individuals, which means healthy people, however they define healthy can be kind of weird, because it may mean that they are symptom-free in the presence of 5 pharmaceuticals. But in those people, it was about 48%. So again, it's just confirming what we talked about in the seminal study, 50-50 of whether or not the vaccine is going to keep you from getting shingles. And then they looked at the people who were immunocompromised, maybe had rheumatoid arthritis, they were on immunobiologics, they had cancer, and they gave them the vaccine. And it only stopped shingles 37% of the time, which means 70% of people got the shot and got shingles anyways.
So the people that are more vulnerable have less benefit.
Exactly. The people that are most vulnerable have the least benefit. And it stopped people who did get the shingles and had the shot, they had a decreased incidence of 60% of getting post-herpetic neuralgia. Well, now, wait a minute. Isn't that shot supposed to not keep me from getting shingles in the first place? And now when I get it, 40% of the time, I'm going to end up with this chronic debilitating post-herpetic neuralgia. Robert, the biggest take home for me on this study is not so much about the shingles vaccine, but about the chickenpox vaccine and what we have done to humanity by eliminating a virus that was mostly benign, was a rite of passage illness like measles was, when somewhere between the ages of 6 and 10, everybody got measles and everybody got chickenpox. And now we are creating this incredible, debilitating, long-term, horrific types of illnesses with no benefit. And it's the first time we've created a shot to address a problem caused by a shot. And so again, where does that end?
Right.
That's pretty horrible.
Well, and I reiterate, growing up, and even as a young adult learning about these things, shingles was just such a thing that you heard rarely and in very elderly people.
And debilitated.
And now younger and younger people, more common, commercials all the time happening for it. I get calls all the time for shingles issues. So, the shots have not made things better. Just from an observational perspective, never having heard of this in young people, middle-aged people, now it's everywhere, that it's like big money, that it's advertised on every news show, every daytime show. So we know that it's actually created a bigger market for this through their propagandizing of the benefit. When we go through the V-Science bites, you're pointing out, well, what is the measurable benefit, if any, and is it worth the risk?
And the answer is unequivocally no. I mean, so I think that, we're seeing, and these are just a couple of studies. I mean, if you go to tenpennyresearchlibrary.com, and register, I mean, you have to register to get in there, but it's free. It doesn't cost anything. You just get you get a responsive email that you have to click on it, and that's our security. So you have to register, and you have to click on the registration email link, and then you can go in and search. And at the very top of the first page, there's a pretty robust explanation on how to maximize your search once you're inside of the library. And so these are just a couple of studies on shingles and on chickenpox of the dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of articles that we have in there. So if you have a friend who says, well, that's only 2 studies, I bet there aren't any more than that. Well, now you can go prove them wrong. So the second study is kind of long, and I want to save our time for this because there's a lot to unpack on this one. And this was a full text study from the journal Vaccine, which is the big guy, the most important one, and from 2017. So it's recent. It's a very recent study. And this was a herpes zoster live vaccine, a 10-year review of post-marketing safety experience. I mean, just think about that. We're looking backwards in time to say whether or not this vaccine was safe. Shouldn't we have determined it was safe before we even put it on the market? I mean, seriously.
That would be a reasonable way, but we find out that it's post-marketing surveillance, and even that is limited in what they claim to lump together to even look at, if they're looking at it at all. So it's fascinating that you found an article that actually goes a 10-year retrospective and looks back. So we're about to learn something really, really important that they're not likely going to present in mainstream media. I don't know if they're going to discuss it in medical circles or not, but we are here.
And this particular database was set up by Merck. And it's a place where only physicians can report adverse events. So now think about that population size. Physicians who deny that vaccines cause any problems, physicians who probably don't even know about this database. And so that the ones that do, I mean, they really are concerned about reporting adverse events. So you're seeing a truer perspective of adverse events over the last 10 years. And the 10-year period of time was from 2006, when the vaccine was first approved, through 2016. It was Merck's Global Safety Database. Now, talk about an oxymoron. But
Yeah.
Right there. They looked at almost 46,000 adverse events. And then they write this, which I just think, and this was in the abstract. So I had to go and dig out the full text to get the whole thing. But in the abstract, it said 93% were non-serious. So that means 7% were really serious, and people probably died, right? Well,
Wow.
Absolutely they did. And you pull that out from the full text. It says a total of 45,898 adverse events were reported, 93% non-serious. Now, when you get to the full text article, the next sentence says this: more than 3,800 persons contracted shingles from the vaccine, with 2 deaths, and 36% did not recover. What does that mean?
What does that mean if you don't recover and you're alive?
Does it mean that yes, they do. So I think it means that they had
permanent state of shingles?
They had a serious adverse event for which they did not recover. And one of them may have been postherpetic neuralgia. And when you dig through that study and all the little tables and charts they have down here, that's what I'm showing you in these bullet points below. These were all the serious adverse events. 4,300 reports of erythema, which is redness, swelling, pain, and itching. The median time to onset of a side effect was 2 days. There were 74% of the reports of the 74% of reports that were in there, 61% recovered. Well, that means 49% didn't recover. And these were the types of things that they had. They contracted shingles from the shot. 3,800 people contracted shingles from the shot. Varicella or varicella-like itching, because remember what they're injecting is 9 times the amount of the varicella virus. It's 9 times more viruses than is in the chickenpox vaccine. They got a rash. They had anaphylaxis within 3 days. They had disseminated herpes zoster, which means that the virus went into their body and infected visceral organs, which can be deadly, particularly if it goes in and affects your kidneys or your liver. They developed herpes ophthalmicus, which is along the nerve the trigeminal nerve that runs along your face and goes around your eye. And that they had 141 reports, 31 were serious. The average age was 71. The average length of time from the time they got the shot until they developed this was almost 2 months. It wasn't immediate. But this, I have many patients in my office and seen over the years, Robert, that had this herpes ophthalmicus. And it goes into their eye. It can cause blindness. It can go in through their eye and go up and cause encephalitis because of the direct connection to their brain. I have 3 people I can think of right now off the top of my head that have chronic, unmitigating, horrible pain around their face and their eye. And yes, they had the shot.
Yeah, and as a bonus, by the way, in today's V-Science Bites, we plan to share with you some things that Dr. Tenpenny has used to help remediate these things, and I'll share some of my experience as a homeopath and working with things I've worked on. So we don't want to leave you in a lurch if you've been through this and you're suffering. So that'll be a little bit of bonus material today on V-Science Bites.
And there were 498 reports of central nervous system experiences, with 100 of them being serious side effects. And then they got something called Ramsay-Hunt syndrome, which affects their ear, that they lose their ability to hear, and they have pain chronically ringing in their ear and horrible pain inside your ear. Can you imagine pain inside your ear that you can't do anything about? And then there were 74 deaths. Now, here's what they always do in all of the studies, and we've talked about this on every V-Science Bites that we've done, Robert, and we talk about it if you guys sign up to take the boot camp, the Mastering Vaccine Info Boot Camp, which open enrollment starts on February 20th. We're already talking about it on Vaxxter. One of the modules in the boot camp is how to read a package insert. And you will see this every single time where it says 74 deaths that were deemed to be temporal, which close in time to the vaccine, but not causally related. So it didn't cause anything. And so the study investigators related to the reports that these were pre-existing conditions or immune compromise and had nothing to do with the vaccine. So with a stroke of a pen, they literally just negated 74 deaths after getting this vaccine.
Sure, and it begs the question, had they not gotten the vaccine, would they ended up dead?
Yeah, I mean, why is that such a logical question to follow up with, right? It's so logical. So disseminated herpes zoster can be deadly. ADM can be deadly. Herpes zoster ophthalmicus can cause blindness and permanent unmitigating pain. There were 74 deaths dismissed as not associated, but who knows for sure? And considering these ramifications, this vaccine at best is a 50-50 deal. Why would you take it and assume all the risk? Why would you do that?
Yeah, well, if you are given all of the information or you can secure all of the information, then at least you can make a fully informed decision about these things, which I believe even physicians, when they recommend this, are not fully informed. Now, that's on them, as you said. Are they willing to read? Are they illiterate? Because if you can do it and I can do it and our listening audience and viewing audience can do it, there's no excuse for the physicians other than to say, I don't have time. Well, you don't have time to do what? Care for your patients? Be concerned enough that you wouldn't give something that could end up harming them more than helping them? I mean, these are legitimate things I think everybody should be looking in the mirror about.
Yeah, exactly. For them to not know, I mean, what is it, that statement that they say in law, that ignorance is no defense?
Mm-hmm.
Well, ignorance is no defense of what you are injecting in your patients and causing them great harm. You can say, I just didn't know. Sorry, busted, you're guilty. So let's spend the last couple of minutes here talking about what people can do instead, because I know people that are in their 50s, 60s, 70s age group that listen to your show or have heard me on various shows. They're seriously concerned because they probably have multiple friends that they've seen had shingles, or their spouse, or somebody else in their family, and they know how debilitating and how horribly painful that this is. And they're like, well, I don't want to get that shot, but I don't want to get the shingles either. And what should I do? Well, I think the most important thing that people can do is high dose vitamin C. And part of the show notes here, I actually put in a little bit of a protocol that comes from the Vitamin C Foundation that starts with starting with 3,000 milligrams of vitamin C ascorbates, not ascorbic acid. Look at your vitamins that you're taking right now, and if they're up in your cupboard and it's ascorbic acid, get something different. It's really not doing you any good. It really needs vitamin C ascorbates. It needs the salt form, which is the form that's absorbed. And there's a little protocol in the show notes here about, if you are getting the shingles, of how you can actually kick them out. And there was a case report of two female patients, 167 and 153, who were diagnosed with shingles and post-herpetic neuralgia. They were given 15 grams, which is 15,000 milligrams of vitamin C IV every other day for 2 weeks. The sudden and total remission of neuropathic pain was observed, and the skin lesions were completely resolved within 10 days. Now, why isn't that something that doctors know about, Robert? I mean, why isn't that something that, when they put people in the hospital for pain management because the pain is so horrible from these shingles, they could be doing this treatment on them and not only mitigating, stopping their pain, but curing them so they don't have to have this horrible, horrible affliction the rest of their life.
Well,
It's
but
just
quite
horrible.
the opposite is happening from the regulatory agencies on the federal level down to the state, trying to stop doctors or physicians who would do this kind of therapy because it costs a fraction of a penny relative to the drug costs associated. And even though, I mean, let's be honest, vitamin C ascorbates, it's not necessarily how vitamin C exists in nature, and it is arguably a pharmaceutical product. I call it vitamin C chemotherapy, but it's largely non-toxic relative to real chemo agents, and can very much be a difference maker for those physicians that are invested in what we call integrative therapies or integrative practices. But again, now you have the regulatory agencies, which we talk with Jonathan Emord about all the time, being captured by pharmaceutical interests and dominating the doctors, the good doctors who would say, you know what, let's try something else here. And you see success. You see reports on this, certainly with the Association for American Physicians and Surgeons. I've read their monthly newsletters for years, the AAPS. And of course, they don't take any drug money. That's why they can promote or talk about these things, which you rarely see in the traditional medical journals that are sponsored by pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah, and they've made it so difficult. Like, we can't even do vitamin C drips in our office anymore. I'm here in my clinic is Tenpenny Integrated Medical Center, and we're in Cleveland, Ohio. The pharmacy board here has made it so difficult. We can't do it anymore. It used to be that you could buy like vials of vitamin C, like from McGuff or whoever the other distributors were, and you could buy bags of IV solution. And if somebody came in and they were starting to get a cold, you could do a Myers cocktail. You could, just like mix it up right there and, slap in an IV, and it would be kicked out of them in like 24 hours. Or if they had the flu or they had something like this post-herpetic neuralgia, that you could just mix it up in your office. Well, they stopped that quite a few years ago. They said that's just unsanitary. We can't do that. So then I'm going to say maybe 5 years ago, what we used to be able to do was to send an order into the compounding pharmacy, and they would overnight it back frozen, and we could keep these IV solutions frozen in our office, separate freezer for up to a week. Well, last year they stopped that. You can't ship it frozen anymore. You have to ship it unfrozen, and you have to use it within 12 hours of when it's been shipped. Well, first of all, that doesn't really work well in our office. And second of all, it's not always convenient for the patient to drop everything and to come in and get it. So and they've made it cost prohibitive. I mean, we used to be able to hang like a bag, like an IV vitamin C for about $100. Now, our cost from the pharmacy pre-mixed was going to be $250. For vitamin C in sterile saline. I mean, the pharmacy cost on that is probably, I don't know, $3 or $4.
Well,
plus
exactly.
shipping.
Yeah, cost effective and helpful in many cases, and at least primarily non-toxic relative to other pharmaceutical treatments, whether it be Valtrex or other things. And if I might proffer my experience in working with patients that have these neuralgias or active varicella activity resulting in shingles, as a homeopath, we can utilize the nosode for the herpes zoster or the varicella virus. That's one thing. We can utilize things like Rus tox that are often indicated, hypericum for nerve pain often indicated. From a mineral perspective, from a whole food perspective, I've utilized selenium from innate response. It's really a food form that I could give in larger doses than you would in other forms that are isolates, and finding similar results, very rapid remediation, because selenium and viruses, when you have adequate selenium in the body, you find less viral activity. And on top of that, utilizing the bioactive silver hydrosol that you know about, that I know about, that has evidence of virostatic interface, that when an ion of silver interacts with a viral protein, it can denature the viral protein or penetrate the viral coat and bind to the DNA that the virus has taken from you or me and stop it from replicating right then and there. So we have options even beyond the vitamin C. If they make it so cost prohibitive, we've got to continue to innovate and say, well, how can we help folks that don't want the drugs, they're done with that, and they want to work with physicians that integrate. So we continue to innovate. We can't stop just because they're trying to stop us.
Absolutely. Well said. And and they're making it harder and harder. I mean, the big censorship thing that's going on the internet right now is they're not just going after vaccines and GMOs and geoengineering and Second Amendment people. They're now going after people with sites that are just about yoga and fitness and power bars, like organic power bars. So, and why is that? If you take a step back and look, I believe in my circles of people in the vaccine stuff, we believe that what is truly behind the motivation for these vaccine mandates is for the open door on the 300 in the developmental pipeline. We have a pretty sure feeling there's going to be a big false flag this summer. We're already seeing it a little bit with SARS. It's the same playbook they did with bird flu, but Ebola is standing in the corner behind that with this new live virus Ebola vaccine that has been fast-tracked and not tested. And so if they have a mandate in place and they have an outbreak of Ebola, even if it's like 5 people, they're going to want to mass vaccinate everybody with this Ebola vaccine. Now, if they have taken away all of our supplements, all of our nutritional things, all of our health and wellness things of ways that we can either stay well or get well, the only other option is the pharmaceutical selection. We're toast, Robert. We're just toast.
Well, Dr. Sherri Tenpenny, another great episode of V-Science Bites, and I appreciate you so much. I know you've been already on some media programs, particularly Del Bigtree's Highwire today, and I appreciate everybody that fans of the Highwire that are joining us here as well after they're done with their show. Do you have time? Do you want to spend some time? I've got an article that Super Don found that he sent you after the break we can hit related to parents of children with chicken pox and their likelihood of developing shingles. This is another thing we didn't plan to cover, but I think it would be kind of cool as a follow-up. And then we can talk about the SARS, which I believe is a scam, and I'll explain it as well.
And the Ebola scam.
That too, yeah. Oh, man, we got some good stuff yet to come, so don't go anywhere.
Yeah, so we just want to make sure that people know that it's a big scam and not fall for the fear factor.
Yeah, please, please, please give a listen to what we're about to do. Tell your friends, join us live or later. Archives throughout many different ways, including Natural News Radio and robertscottbell.com. V-Science Bites continues. Little bonus time with Dr. Sherri Tenpenny after this. Once again, thanks to our friends at where? Trinity School of Natural Health.
For thousands of years, the iris has been examined to determine potential deficiencies and health issues in the body. Every human optic nerve contains between 800,000 to 1.7 million nerve fiber endings. These nerves connect our eyes to the brain and continue down our spinal cord, connecting to every organ and gland in our body. This course utilizes the iridology chart developed by Bernard and Ellen Jensen, which tells us what markings in the iris may be pointing to issues in certain organs or glands. In this course, you will learn how to identify the genetic strengths and weaknesses with organs, glands, and tissues, tendencies towards tissue irritation and inflammation, how to find the potential ability of an organ's reaction to the presence of illness, discernment of familial patterns of illness, including digestive issues, blood sugar tendencies, blood anomalies, and heart issues, and how to locate potential nervous system imbalances, spinal subluxations, circulatory disturbances, connective tissue weakness, and much, much more. Iridology is a fascinating art and science. Learning it will change the way you look at the human eye. If you're interested in learning iridology or have questions whether it's right for you or not, please send us an email or call and get started on your journey to transform the world.
Thank you all for being here, and thank you to Dr. Sherri Tenpenny for joining us as often as possible. We did 2 V-Science Bites in a row, 1 week apart, and you're still standing. You're amazing. It was really great. Now, and I loved, and I was just talking to you about this, that we got to add a little bit in today's version, some positive things that people can do, steps they can take, either with physicians or without. I want people to get help. I talk about the power to heal being everybody's, and we've got to empower people to help them go, hey, you look into this, okay? You get to decide. But here's an interesting angle on the shingles thing. Let me show everybody the article. It's in the show notes at robertscottbell.com. This is a mainstream article coming out through Health News at United Press International. It says parents of children with chickenpox less likely to develop shingles. What are we saying here? What are they saying here? What have they found, Dr. Sherri Tenpenny?
They found everything that we've been saying over the last 2 weeks and everything that I've been saying for the last 19 years. So, wow. And it's like front page news.
Amazing that they covered it. Of course, there's always the caveat, but the results of this new study still suggest vaccination offers the best protection against the disease. Well, it's only because you've eliminated this exposure that would be beneficial to the actual wild circulating strain of chickenpox that would prevent a lot of these adults that we were just talking on the break briefly as well, seeing people that are largely living healthier lifestyles also succumbing to shingles. Like, what is that? Perhaps this article is giving us the clue that without the circulating viruses, we're never getting nudged. Our immune system's never being reminded of, hey, remember this? No big deal. Okay. Now it's not there. And now the vulnerability is there. Even if you live a healthy lifestyle and you've been under undue stress, you lose a loved one, a pet, something that just zaps your immune system, and suddenly, whoa, shingles? Really?
Yeah, that was just like on cue that your earpiece fell out there. Yeah, really? Boom. And what's interesting, Robert, I mean, if you go back through the show notes, I mean, we've been doing V-Science Bites, I think, since July, I believe.
I think so.
So, and we've been doing, 1 vaccine a month. We kind of highlight that. Everything is consistently the same with every vaccine. We're just going through and pulling out stuff from the Tenpenny Research Library and showing you the mainstream peer-reviewed medical literature saying that this stuff doesn't work. And so when people say, oh, we need more studies, no, we don't need any more studies. In fact, that was one of the things when I was on Highwire today, kind of towards the end of the segment, Del made a passing comment about like more research. And I said, no, we don't need any more research, Del. What we really need is just to expose the research that's already been done.
Yes,
it's already been done.
Mm-hmm.
And that we've already shown that there's problems. Now, I mean, the science is never done. We can always do more research. It's, sort of the thing that, somewhere along the line, we're going to develop something or see something that we maybe haven't seen before, maybe. Mm-hmm. And they're not just like recycling the same old stuff. But the idea is like, if I have 11,000 articles in my collection, and I'm sure I don't have all of them. Other people probably have thousands in their collection, and there may be some overlap, but we can't pick every single one. And that's already been done over the last 20 to 25 years, showing that vaccines don't work. Vaccines cause harm. Vaccines are nothing more than injecting foreign matter into the human body and somehow saying it's going to be beneficial. I mean, it's just, we have to stop. We have to stop this, Robert. It just, people have to just stand up and not let these politicians put these bills through, these egregious bills through. I have to, let me see, hold on a second. I want to...
Where'd she go? Where's Dr. Sherri? There she is. Yeah.
This book.
All right, let me pull it up. Hold it up again. The Doctrine of the Lesser Magistrates. Yes.
Do you know about this?
Yeah, we've talked about it briefly before, but how do people get a hold of that book?
Amazon.
Okay.
Amazon. And it's skinny. It's a little tiny book. So everybody should read this.
I don't know. It's bigger than your head.
It's like 100 pages. And it's all footnoted and referenced. And what it really is all about is that when the government does egregious things and is breaking the law and is passing laws that are unconstitutional and taking away our rights, A lesser magistrate, so somebody that's like your town city council or your local mayor, has the right to supersede those horribly passed bills and say, no, they're not going to be in effect here. And so the subtitle on this book is A Proper Resistance to Tyranny and a Repudiation of Unlimited Obedience to Civil Government.
Mm-hmm.
It's magical, Robert. We need to we need to get Jonathan on board with this.
Oh, certainly, yeah.
And have this be out more and more and more through your show, because this is I believe that this is a tool, that an unutilized tool as a blowback against this push for these mandatory vaccine laws.
Right.
And once you read it, you'll totally agree with me.
Yeah, I did a lecture on homeopathy last night to a group through Healing Strong. And, one of the things I tend to remind people, bring out, because of the threats to homeopathy right now. We've talked about the FDA altering the way they're regulated. Now it's a mystery. The industry group, which I used to be a board member of, AHP, is saying, oh, it's not a big deal. It's not. It's like, I don't know what you're talking about. But when you have no rules or no playbook to go by in terms of manufacture and labeling and all that, you basically are at the whim of bureaucrats to say, well, I don't know what it is, but when I see it, I'll tell you. Well, that's a little late. So it basically rules out innovation. A lot of players that would make homeopathy available are now not going to. There's a lot of things like that. And I said, how many of you think that it's appropriate even to have to ask the government for permission to access a natural medicine? How many of you, after you grew up and moved out, call your mom and dad to say, hey, Mom, can I stay up late tonight? They all shook. Of course, you don't call your parents. So now you call your nanny government to say, hey, can I take a homeopathic remedy? I mean, this is the mindset that has to be overturned, that we have now become children of government, not children of God, so to speak. But again, this is the spirituality. This is the religious freedom aspect of it that they've run roughshod over on the vaccine issue by making government the God, and they claim ownership of your children and then you.
Exactly. And so we are asking permission. Like, I love that analogy. We're asking permission for things that we already have. And we already have the right to stay up late at night. We don't need to ask permission from our parents to stay up late at night, right? Mm-hmm. We already have the right to say, no, thank you. I don't want that injected into my body. And the government says, too bad. I'm telling you, you're going to get it injected for the greater good of public health. I mean, what kind of nonsense have we allowed them to get away with?
Well, it's collectivist. It's basically the slope to communism, where the government owns everything, including you, including your children, that they are able to get away with it thus far. And I think that has to be brought out as well. Again, I haven't read the book that you have there, but I'm anxious to get it, review it, and we'll talk about it with Jonathan Emord as well.
Yeah, I love on the back cover, it says, this provides a hopeful tool for legitimate resistance to tyranny, often without causing any major upheaval in society. So I think the doctrine teaches us how to rein in lawless acts by government and restore justice in our nation.
Yeah.
This goes all the way back to the Magna Carta.
Wow. How do they do it? They always declare emergencies. It's an emergency, right? And I joke about this. I'll say it again. Like, God sends down the 10 Commandments, and then you forgot the one tablet that said, unless it's an emergency, then discard everything I've just told you. It's like the Constitution written, unless it's an emergency, then we can ignore it. That's how they rule. They rule via emergency, via necessity. The rule of necessity knows no law. That's where we are right now. And of course, they're ramping up the fear campaign because people are getting the word. They're listening to the V-Science Bites. They're watching Dell's show talking about all these things, and they're starting to go, I question the fear mongering, so they have to ratchet up the fear even further. Check this article out from InfoWars. Let's see if I can bring that up on the screen. It says, Professor warns new coronavirus has the same kill rate as the Spanish flu, which killed 20 to 50 million people. Listen, Dr. Sherri Tenpenny, I dispute the whole claim that there was one virus that killed 20 to 50 million people in 1918 because they dug up a frozen guy in Alaska and said, oh, look what we found. This is it. It's killed It's like, how do you get away with such nonsense statements? What was going on? The law of the terrain. What was going on at that time? World War I, nutrition, squalor,
chemical warfare,
vaccine, experimental vaccines, aspirin, different suppressive medicines that were coming out versus what we know, even within the historical records of mortality rates for those who went to see homeopaths and naturopaths, where you talk about survival rates 90-95% versus 50% mortality with the allopaths who suppressed symptoms, poisoned their patients. This is the same old story. We go back to Harris Coulter's Divided Legacy series to understand this is not new what we're dealing with today.
No, and and it's even more recent than that. I mean, I wrote my book Fowl about the bird flu in 2005. This is the exact same playbook, different virus, same words, same everything. In fact, we just opened it's still in development mode, but we're putting together a website called Ebola 2020. Don't go and look at it right now. It's really kind of ugly, but I've got 4 writers and myself, and I'm going to be putting a lot of stuff up there from my Fowl book because it's exactly the same thing.
Playbook, yeah.
It's the exact. In fact, I still think I've got that long list of articles. And when I was writing that book, I set up a URL. It might still be out there. I haven't looked at it for a long time. It's called birdfluhype.com. And I parked all those articles there, and I'm going to see if it's still viable. I don't know if it is or not. I still own the URL, and it showed every week all these different things. And I was writing that book in real time, kind of like as it was happening. I was kind of putting all these things together and digging out all the stuff. And at the end, the last chapter was called Tying It All Together, and I did talk about that whole thing with Spanish flu and I found some really old documents that from World War I in the training and how they used to have like chemical warfare drills at night. They would wake them up in the middle of the night and they would blow all these horrible chemicals over them. Mustard gas. There was something like 34 different types of deadly chemical warfare. It was the most deadly chemical warfare that has ever been on the planet. And we never talk about that. Right. And they used to have time the guys to see how long it would take them to put on their supposedly protective gear. Yeah. And then there was like thousands of tons of chemicals that were exploded over the war theater. Then that goes up in the air, goes circulating around the planet. And they said, well, how does that really happen? Well, I used an example that was at about that same time that Mount Pinatubo had erupted, and that the soot that came out of that volcano, they had tracked it and traced it all around the world. So why wouldn't these chemicals go all over the world? And then I found the golden article, Robert. I found the golden article that showed that if a garden variety influenza virus was exposed to 1 part per trillion of dioxin, it weaponized that virus, and it became completely deadly. Yeah. So then where were we seeing all the bird flu outbreaks? Over Vietnam. And that was where Agent Orange was, right? Dioxin, right?
Well, but they're going to say, Dr. Sherri Tenpenny, you and RSB are so wrong. This is different. This time it's different, right? It's like, you figured us out. No, this time we're going to come back with something even scarier. Check it out, because this Chinese coronavirus we're calling the Wuhan virus, it's traced back to snakes. It's reptilian. Now you got to be really scared, right? It's a reptilian virus, and I show everybody.
Jump species, right?
Yeah, I've got this. Check this out.
Maybe it didn't.
Yeah, check it out. You can kiss me. It's a bat coronavirus, not mine, because others are saying it's from bats. And did Ozzy bite the bat? What is it? Is it a snake bite? No, they've got a name for it. I'd say there's a patent pending. They've talked about a patent that's being held on the coronavirus that exists already. There's profit to be had here in addition to whatever nefarious schemes are going on. And, I talked with John Rappaport again, my good buddy. You know John for many years. And we were covering this in the early 2000s, mid-2000s, the scare of SARS. We reported every week, when I was weekly at that time, there would be a new pronouncement out of Canada. Frank Plummer, the doctor who was the researcher for WHO, he was their official. And initially they said, 90% of the people with SARS have this coronavirus. Every week that number dropped and dropped till months later, he admitted, we can't find any coronavirus in any of these SARS victims. It's like, so what was it? How about toxic pollution? How about where it started at the Emord Gardens, they claimed in Hong Kong, where sewage was dripping from, the pipes? Does that impact health, respiratory? How about this Wuhan virus? What's going on in China? Have you seen the air quality in the winter in China? It's the inversion. You can't breathe that stuff and not have respiratory problems. Of course, they blame the virus because, hey, it's not industry. We don't have to stop polluting you.
I know. And that was all part of the whole bird flu thing too, is exactly the same thing. I mean, the tons and tons of garbage and stuff that was in those rivers and where they all started from. And then, then they would have this big outbreak in the Philippines. Well, what was happening in the Philippines? The Philippines is the #1 producer of pulp paper in the world. And how do they make pulp paper white? With dioxin. So you take these garden variety influenza things and now you put chemicals on them. And think of how many more, so that was in 2005. So we're now 15 years later. How many more trillions of tons of chemicals and garbage have we polluted this earth with? You know, my husband, Kevin, used to always say, humans are the only mammals that poop where they eat.
Yeah.
You know, that
He was funny. I love Kevin. I see his smile even today. You know that.
Yeah, I know. It's been 6 years. Can you believe it?
It's just amazing. We've lost some dear ones in the past years. We have. I mean, our buddy Liam Sheff, too. We talked about these viral scams and, you know, how it always is a cover for toxic pollution, the law of the terrain. I mean, it's like it's the terrain, stupid, not the virus. But if they can succeed in frightening us again, they'll restrict travel. They'll mandate vaccinations before you get on airplanes. All the things we're tying it into, including
they're
Real
already
ID.
talking about checking airports now. People coming in. Do they have a fever? Do they have a cough? Are they coming in from places where the virus has been identified? You know, it's the sort of thing like they did with Zika, right? I mean, Zika's been around since the 40s. Oh, no, it's a brand new virus. It's causing microcephaly in babies. No, I don't think so. It's like, you know, sometimes you just have to laugh, Robert, because this gets so heavy and so serious that if you don't find the humor in it somewhere, you just want to go crawl underneath a rock and say, eat, drink, and be merry because tomorrow we'll die, right?
Yeah. Well, we got to party on somehow, but but yeah, the thing is, this information ultimately is very empowering. It's obviously disempowering for those powers that be that want to control us, want to own us, want to frighten us into submission, or put gold stars on us and lead us into concentration camps. They don't like this information. When you look at them and you say, just like the old fable, emperor wears no clothes. And on these issues of viral causation, even if you can show some level of viral activity, it has to have a facilitation. In other words, there has to be a weakness, a vulnerability we talk about. And all of the time when we talk about the law of the terrain, recognizing that deficiencies, toxicity, all of these things play a huge role in the allowance of manifesting that which you already have in your body, much less something that you may encounter from outside of you.
Yep. Exactly. I mean, it's the age-old story, right? It's it's all about the terrain. You know, Beauchamp and Pasteur. I mean, it goes back to the 1800s.
Yeah.
And we're just recycling stuff. It's sort of like recycling mandatory vaccines. I mean, the first mandatory vaccination law was in 1853. And when did the anti-vaccination movement start? 1853, as soon as they were mandating vaccines, and it was called Our Baby's Battle. And it was started by parents whose kids had been maimed or killed by a smallpox vaccine. We're just seeing history repeat itself.
It's absolutely incredible. And then we add to the mix, as we talk about the other thing, you're going to hide under the rock again, but 5G. EMFs, things like that. And we always have to innovate beyond it because it doesn't look like we're slowing down technology unless we just run out of energy and oil. But again, we're always looking to strategize, mitigate these things, the worst aspects of it. But it's not one thing. If it was one thing, we are so resilient as a species. We're pretty tough. It's amazing we're alive considering all the things we know. But at the same time, there is a point of overwhelming. And that's where we see disease manifestation and diagnoses, et cetera. But we manage, we adapt, but it's chronic survival as opposed to vital, the vitalistic view. You have the vital force flowing through you. You look at someone, you go, wow, that's health. It's just oozing from their pores. And to see people like that is so rare. When you do, you're like, wow, what is that person doing? Maybe we need to bottle that. But these are the things, trying to find people that are living this way and emulate them, or listen to the masters in the past who discussed the law of the terrain and how we can apply that even today.
Exactly. And I think what you're talking about, like cumulative load, right? Cumulative load of all of these different things that in a very short period of time, that our cellular matrix and all of those different things don't have a time for adaptation. And so, I mean, things that have happened to the human body in the last, I don't know, less than 100 years, we had like 30,000 years to adapt to various things up to that point. Right. And so that cumulative load, that whole toxic cumulative stuff is pretty bad. And so we have to do the best that we can, with our food and our water and our spirituality and, getting in touch with your God, however you define him or her. Right. I'll be politically correct when I say that.
We got to be sensitive, but there are only two sexes, XX and XY. And somebody got fired for saying that in Denver Post, interestingly enough. It's kind of wild. And I get there's confusion out there due to toxicological impact, xenoestrogens and things. We recognize that. But it doesn't change the XXXY necessarily. Yesterday, one of the things, I always talk about that. I think the physician's job, whether it be holistic or allopathic, ultimately is to reconnect people to source, spirit, a vitalistic view. And then somebody at the end of the lecture yesterday on homeopathy, it was funny. It's like, I hear what you're saying, but after you've reconnected to spirit, then what should I do? And I thought, well, that's a fair question. I get that. And I just like you're talking.
And how did you answer that?
Well, I talked about just what we're discussing now. It's reducing the burden. All right. We've got to make decisions about all of the accumulation, dropping a load, right? How do we reduce that load significantly? One of those choices is choosing better what we put into our mouths, into our pie holes. And I said,
what comes out of our mouths too.
Well,
choosing
that
better
too.
With that.
But I said going organic or the equivalent, and that alone was a significant step for me when I was a young man at 24, never hearing the word homeopathy, learning of it, saying I got to go clean up my act. And that was significant. And we've seen studies, Jeffrey Smith has done these things and publicized them in his videos as well, that people simply switching to an organic non-GMO diet, extraordinary recoveries are occurring without even other overt interventions, holistic or medical. So reducing the burden is significant because the vital force has an ability to adapt to so much. If you reduce a significant part of that burden, you can overcome a lot.
I know. And it's just amazing how I think that we're going to reach that tipping point pretty soon, Robert. I think we're going to get to that 10% of the population that gets it, that we're going to just change things. I mean, when we were in Trenton, that up there, and I went up to Trenton in New Jersey when we were fighting that bill. And then the day that Dell was there, because Dell was up there on the day that they voted. And then they had several of the senators that were voting against it came out and they were saying, I see mama bears everywhere I look. I see mama bears, and they have poked the mama bears. And I think that that's happening and the daddy bears too. I mean, there were a lot of men there, and I think that the men are now kind of, it's always been kind of historically a lopsided, many more women in this anti-vax sector or ex-vax sector. So I like that term a lot better.
Yes.
And because most anti-vaxxers are ex-vaxxers, they stopped vaccinating for either because they got smart or because they got hurt. Yep. And so, but there's more and more dads that are stepping into that space. And I think we really need some strong men leaders to step up in all of these areas, Robert, because think about the lion's share of our legislators are men. So they just look at us women as like, we're just loud. Yeah. We're a fringe group. We're pretty small, but we just happen to be loud. We have no idea.
They learned differently in Trenton on that day.
Yeah,
and it only made one of those men, Sweeney, even madder. But of course, let him spit all he wants. It's not going to get better for him the more he pushes this issue. Listen, for our UK Health Radio crowd, we got to sign off. I'll be back for some bonus information to reveal. I don't know, Dr. Sherri Tenpenny, when you have to run, but
I got to run soon.
Okay, so we may or may not see her in a moment, but I'll be back. Maybe Super Don will reconnect. And there is a question of the day from one of our new Patreon supporters, our patron supporters, Bill, on GERD and sleep. We're going to cover that as well. And Dr. Sherri Tenpenny, you're awesome. Love you. Big hugs. Hope to see you real soon.
Okay. Take care.
All right. We'll talk to you soon. Everybody, remember, the power to heal is yours, and we'll be back with more powerful healing after this.
The Robert Scott Bell Show. The Robert Scott Bell Show.
Check out a sweet offer that my friends at Better Way Health give. This is an immune boosting supplement that you can't get anywhere else.
Beta-glucan activates and enhances your immune response to invaders.
These things are brilliant for modulating the immune system.
Someone has a need for help in supporting their immune system, I'm looking at the glucan product. It's amazing, and there's been an enormous amount of research done on this.
It's the most studied immunomodulator on Earth, with over 14,000 published studies referencing beta-glucan, and it's currently being tested in roughly 100 clinical trials.
If you like your dietary supplements with validated science, there's nothing that has more behind it than the beta-1,3-D-glucan for Better Way Health.
Probably the most heavily researched substances that I'm aware of that modulates the immune system.
It rebuilds your immune system.
Consistency and quality are everything.
Here, you want to see my supplement drawer? Here it is. Get ready.
I was putting together my research and I tripped on this supplement called beta-glucan.
There it is. It's very small. I take beta-glucans, immune booster.
You don't have to worry that you're overstimulating the immune system. We have been just amazed.
I take like 2 a day from Better Way Health.
It's been tested against about 36 other immune-boosting products and found to be superior.
If you have an immune system or you want one, beta-1,3-D-glucan, that transfer point is very unique. It's going to get the results that you're looking for. I support it and I use it.
Better Way Health, I got to tell you, you can spend more time, you can spend more money, but you cannot get better service than you're going to get from those guys down there. They are truly 24 karat.
The brand you want to get is called Transfer Point Beta-1,3-D-glucan, and you can get it from betterwayhealth.com. Let's spread the message about beta-glucans. It's a powerful substance from nature that can help you.
All right, here we go. Back at it. This is the Robert Scott Bell Show continuing right now. And let's see if I can bring Super Don into the mix. He's been monitoring the feed. And between Jonathan Emord and Sherri Tenpenny, I think knocked it out of the park today. Gosh, man. The V-Science Bites, they so rock. And it was fun to be able to give a little bit more positive input at the end to say, hey, what you can do if you're suffering. But that article you found on parents of kids who have chicken pox not getting shingles. I mean, it makes all the sense in the world.
Totally. Yeah. That's just one of those coincidences where she was coming on to talk about shingles and it was just in the news. So it was very, very timely. But yeah, good show today. Good show today. Enjoyed everything that we were talking about, and people were busy in the chat rooms for sure.
Yeah. We have a question coming in. I'm just looking at the chat room and YouTube, and you check out the other chat rooms about BX Cookie. Is it possible to take too much selenium? Yes, it is. But the form matters because a lot of doctors still fear selenium. And, I think, even with Dr. Sherri Tenpenny, a physician, a DO, of course, that's equivalent to an MD in our culture. The vitamin C is a synthetic. It's not a whole food form of vitamin C like you get from Mega Food. But if you're going to IV something, I would rather have you IV vitamin C than chemotherapy any day. Chemotherapy over chemotherapy. But as I said, my experience is a little different with homeopathy, with selenium and other minerals, things like that. We can overcome these shingles without even having to do IVs of C. If you have access to that, fine, knock yourself out. It's not. I'm not saying don't. It's up to you to do it. I'm all about freedom. But if you do the innate response selenium, and let me see if I can bring that up. I'm going to show you the show notes here. And here we go. We got a question of the day coming up as well. But if you go to choosetobehealthy.com, and I'm just going to scroll up till I find the banner that gets you there. Click on the banner. Let me just see if I can open that. We're going to get to the selenium that I utilize. And you could just go over to our buddy Chris Barr, not a doc. Chris Barr recommends. It'll come right up. And you'll see the selenium. There you go. 90 tablets. Mega Food has one that's 60 tablets. Same thing. You don't need to add extra E of any kind. And that's the form of selenium. Now, I've utilized upwards of 1,000 micrograms in a day. That would be the equivalent of taking 4 tablets 5 times in a day to get to 1,000 micrograms. But if you're taking a synthetic isolate, sodium selenite, even selenomethionine, those are more problematic because they are not processed by the body like real food, like we would get selenium from food. So it's a distinct difference that I have to point out, and Chris Barr points out that it differentiates from those doctors still who say, don't take too much selenium, it's toxic. And even if you did take too much and you got brittle nails or hair starts falling out, you stop taking that selenium, and in a matter of days, all of that reverses. That's not me saying take the wrong form of selenium. I'm just saying the reality is it's not like mercury overdose. But you can take too much selenium. So, but get the right form, and it's not likely to happen. I've not seen it. Chris Barr in decades has not seen it, and he's gone upwards of 1,200 micrograms for people who are suffering with cancer, for instance. So, hopefully that's helpful to you. You got it. Oh, additional. It's not TMI, not too much information. Good. All right. So now, should we go to the question of the day, or what should we do next?
I've had a couple people asking about what was the name of that book. I assume they're talking about the one that Dr. Sherri Tenpenny had up.
Did anybody pick it up? Because I'm hosting a show. I didn't write it down. I couldn't type it at the moment.
It's called The Doctrine of the Lesser Magistrates.
Yes.
Yes.
Right. And Super Don, you got she made a good explanation for why she modified the notes from last week.
Mm-hmm.
So make sure that gets dropped in, because it really was a significant shift what she did. For the Shingles Part 1.
If you go over to the website and you want to download the show notes, it's over on the V-Science Bites page. There's the episode that you can watch, and then there's a link to download the PDF with the show notes, the updated show notes.
Excellent. Yeah, so if I go there right now, I'm going to look at that, episode 13, 14, 15. 15 was Shingles Part 1. And so if I click on that, right below the video, you can click on the PDF, and I'm going to do that, and it should open up the new version. And there it is. Sweet. Super D. Well done. Well done. I don't know if you can embed it in the notes of that day, but that might be too much.
No, I can run and do that later.
That'd be cool. So let's see. What else we got? There's everybody chatting. There was Emord. There's the visual on that. Let's see what else. There's Super Don, a still shot of you. All right, now let's get the moving Super Don. So shall we do a question of the day? To wrap it up here? All right. Yep. Let's play it, and let's get banned in Brazil.
Excuse me. I'd like to ask you a few questions.
Question of the day theme leads to the question of the day. Let me get you to it so you can see it as I talk about it. And it is in the show notes at robertscottbell.com at the bottom of the page today. It says this from Bill. I'm a Patreon member. Thank you, Bill, supporting us on Patreon. That will get us close to, we are investigating seriously, a computer that won't make Super Don look like he's in that video game where you look like Blockhead. What is that called?
Is that what it's doing right now?
No, you're looking good right now, but there's been some glitchiness. So he says, I love your show. I got two problems. GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disease, and poor quality sleep. What solutions do you recommend? Now, Super Don, I got to ask you, since we're in bonus territory here, have you ever had what somebody might call GERD? Do you know of anything like that in your background?
Well, GERD would be considered a disease. I've had acid indigestion before.
Mm-hmm. That's pre-GERD. It was that.
Yeah, but I've never had GERD, no.
Where it was every day and on and on and on.
Now, my dad, on the other hand, did have, they called it something else. It was like Barrett's something or other.
Barrett's esophagus. There you go.
Yeah, which I think is kind of the same similar type thing.
You've got erosion of the esophagus due to blowouts of the stomach when you don't produce enough stomach acid. That which is in there, when things aren't broken down properly, will kind of putrefy and cause gaseous emissions. So you got little eruptions going on, and a little bit of acid gets up into an area where the tissue is not designed to handle it. It can erode it. It can inflame it. That can create even cancer later on if it goes on chronically for years. The medical solution is what? They say, you know what? We just got to shut down your stomach acid altogether. And they give you, now back in the day when it happened to me and Super Don, you can remember this, Tums, Rolaids, Alka-Seltzer. Those were the big names for neutralizing stomach acid. And did you ever eat those Tums like candy? I mean, all the fruit flavored ones and all of that.
I remember I never really liked them much, and I did try
flavored chalk, basically.
Alka-Seltzer maybe a couple of times. That was more like when my younger years. It helped with a hangover. It wasn't a bad thing to try out, but
yeah.
I mean, they did kind of work. I mean, I remember
Well,
that
it
they
neutralized
did help.
symptoms, soothes
Yeah.
things down. But now with the next generation, they're called PPIs, proton pump inhibitors, and they stop the production. They just shut cold stone. Prilosec, Prevacid, the purple pill or whatever it is. And, of course, inevitably you worsen digestion, you worsen the breakdown. And we've talked about nutrient deficiencies. We've talked about cancer manifestation due to these drugs. They're very serious drugs. And so gastroesophageal reflux, it's real, but it isn't caused by what they say it's caused by, nor do they maybe even acknowledge the cause. They just give you a drug to shut down function. So my goal and role is to help restore function. Here are some things, Bill, that I would do. And I'm going to go back to, let's see, all right, I'm going to go back to choosetobehealthy.com. I am going to go to Alta Health Products, their page. There's a link, and then I'm going to click on this called Alta Cangest. It comes in a 4-ounce tub. It's got a little dinky spoon, and I'm going to show you this right now. Let's see. There it is. And it's powder. You need to take a level teaspoon of this stuff, a level teaspoon, put it into warm water to activate it, and then drink it down 3, maybe even a 4th time during the day before you go to bed even. And that is the corrective measure in terms of this herbal blend that is so phenomenal. Generations have been benefiting by it. And you can get it from choosetobehealthy.com. Now, if you need to heal the tissue very rapidly, we talk about the silver aloe protocol, Super Don. Of course, that's a favorite of a lot of people. Aloe alone can do good things. Silver alone can. But you put the silver and aloe together, it'll not only soothe and heal tissue, but it'll eradicate dysbiosis and things. And a lot of times people with GERD that are on PPIs end up re-diagnosed with, not C. diff, but H. pylori, Helicobacter pylori, that associate with stomach ulcers and things. And H. pylori can only proliferate in the stomach when you have not adequate stomach acid production. So another thing I would go to from here, let's see if we can find it, is the magnesium. Let's see if I can find it in here. I'm going to click it. So this is how I make it easy for you. I show you to do it in real time. Here we go. This is the Megafood Magnesium. I don't have any. They don't sponsor me, dagnammit. I wish Megafood would sponsor me. They got a lot of good products we like and we use. We use this magnesium. One of the keys to producing adequate stomach acid is magnesium. That mineral is often overlooked. So 1 to 2 in the morning, 1 to 2 at night. And since you're also disrupted on your sleep, Bill, I would say take 2 magnesium before you go to bed as well. Now, there are other aspects of disruption of sleep cycles, which include hypoglycemia. The middle of the night, your blood sugar plummets, and you wake up in a sweat and fear and anxious and hungry. You don't know what's going on. And so in that context, we'll go back to the Choose to Be Healthy website. We'll find out something else that you can do if you're not already doing it under the Chris Barr Recommended tab. Let's see what comes up. The GTF Chromium. So this is another aspect of what is helpful. 100 micrograms 3 or even a 4th time during the day will also help as the selenium with the liver, but the chromium helps with blood sugar management, energy regulation in the body. And of course, if the liver is congested, if the pancreas is not functioning well, or if you're not able to adequately offload the sugars when you don't have adequate chromium, it's not about insulin only, then you can have disrupted sleep. So there are some of your suggestions. Super Don, what have you done for sleep issues, or do you sleep like a baby?
Yeah, I really haven't had too many problems with sleep. I mean, if I did have a problem with sleep, I'd probably go with CBD.
Sure. That's a good one.
Yeah. I don't have the kind in front of me here that I would use for that, but there's a decarboxylated
the raw form,
whole plant raw form. Yeah. That if I take enough of it, it'll knock me out.
Well,
yeah,
the other thing,
I haven't tried the kratom yet for sleep.
Okay.
But I know that. Hold on a second. Dude, I love having props. You
That's
used to
awesome.
be the prop guy all the time.
You're the prop now.
I've
You're the
got
prop
props too. Anyway,
yeah,
the red relaxation
Right. That's my
vein
favorite. My
of
wife's
the
favorite.
kratom that we get from Brave Botanicals is designed for pain and for sleep issues.
True.
So that would be the one you'd want to take.
Very good. Also, how about exercise? I don't know if Bill is exercising during the day, didn't say, but getting vigorous exercise, using your body as it's designed to be used, you'll find that sleep is much better after you've exhausted yourself in a positive way by using that physical body. Also, basic things, light, blacking out your room or wearing an eye mask somehow because that light can intrude and disrupt deep sleep. We can also look at Wi-Fi at night, unplugging the router or getting the key technology to protect you from Wi-Fi and harmful EM fields. God, there's so many things we can do, from chamomile tea.
Get grandkids. That helps you sleep. Right. By the end of the day, you just kind of fall in bed.
Yeah. Well, Bill, thank you for becoming a Patreon supporter of the Robert Scott Bell Show. We really appreciate that.
Indeed. In fact, I got to tell you, we are up to 39 patrons.
We're climbing the charts. Well, soon enough, we're going to have to do 3 hours.
But I'm looking at that and I'm going, God, 39.
That's a little number.
40. We can't stop at 39. So head on over there if you feel compelled to do so. Get us up to 40. And that's a good round number, right? 40.
Yeah.
And there's some cool perks that you can get. I haven't heard anything on the T-shirt yet. I know we're like right there.
We're right there. Although Ginger Taylor said it. What did she say it looked like? She was very funny.
Oh yeah, she said that it looked like a Hell's Angel tombstone or something.
Right. I think it's cool.
I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But depending on what level that you sign up for over Patreon, if you want to go beyond just supporting the show at $4.99 a month, there's some cool perks with T-shirts and books and.
All right. What is Michael Bolden saying? He says CBN for sleep. Is that like Canadian Broadcasting Network? Does that put him to sleep? What is he talking about?
That would be pretty boring. Have you ever watched Canadian TV?
No, eh? Are they really boring?
I'm
a guessing that he meant to say CBD for sleep.
Well, you know what? I wonder if he's talking about a different kind. It's there's interesting cannabinoids that come out where most people are familiar with CBD.
Oh, it's a different cannabinoid, CBN.
I believe it's a different kind of compound.
Look at Bolden just taking it to another level.
Yeah.
Listen, I invite Bolden on the show. He says he's too busy, but yet in the chat room, he could tell us all the things he could be telling us on the air.
That's true.
Right?
That's true. But he's a busy guy.
Yeah, when he's going out to lunch and taking pictures of his food.
If he's not taking pictures of food and really cool sunsets and great shots of the downtown Los Angeles, he's doing his own podcast, video things on for the 10th Amendment Center.
And the 10th Amendment Center has a Patreon support, too. And by the way, my mother is a Patreon of the 10th Amendment Center. Michael Bolden. Thank you. Taking money from my mom, whose birthday is coming up on the 29th. She'll be 86. But she believes in the 10th Amendment Center and all that Bolden and everybody's doing. So, CBN. So thank you for correcting where my head was at that moment.
There you go.
Anyway, let's see what else we got. No more shift today for us. I'm glad we got through that. We survived talking about that and shingles. So, are there any questions coming in through Facebook Live or any other chat rooms before I have to run and get my daughter? Who I will share. She apparently did. She's in art class, and she did. Let me see if I could see this. Their art classes had a project where you take half of a person's face, like an image or something that's somehow there, and then you from memory or whatever have to do the other half of the face.
Oh, yeah.
And she chose to do Carol Alt. And
nice.
I'm going to hold it up for everybody to see. I don't know if you can see that. That's what she did.
Wow, look at that.
And it looks like that's pretty cool. I just got that texted to me.
That is incredibly impressive. I'm loving that. Yeah.
I'm looking at like Brianna Bollinger and my daughter Ariana are amazing artists. I have to say, they're pretty cool.
They are.
I'll have to send that to Carol.
Yeah, I was very impressed with Brianna's stuff too. I noticed that a couple months ago.
Yeah. So thank you for loving the show. Thank you for loving Don Naylor and tolerating me. And I appreciate y'all being here. Tomorrow, what do we got for Friday's edition? Do we know?
It's all us at the moment. So there's plenty. So if you guys have questions, comments, please submit them over at robertscottbell.com on the Contact Us button.
Mm-hmm.
And we will definitely have some things to talk about. There's always plenty of things. Let me see if I got anything in the hopper here.
Mm-hmm.
Looks like FDA may be going after hemp oil.
Figures.
I think we need to talk about that. And in that same topic, we will have our buddy Miles from CV Sciences next week.
Excellent. Yeah, he's a bright young man.
Give us an update there.
We do have the NOCO Hemp Expo. If you're in Denver, come and see me. I'll be there with our friends from CV Sciences, and I'll be broadcasting live from that event. And that's happening March 27th and 28th at the Denver, the Hemp Expo, NOCO Hemp Expo in Denver, Colorado. So I'll see all my Rocky Mountain friends and family out there at that one. That'll be awesome.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, thanks for tuning in, guys. And until tomorrow, have yourself a great day.
Have yourself a wonderful day. Co-create it. And we'll be back tomorrow with more powerful healing. Place for health, freedom, healing, liberty. Let me play that thing you just made. Another Mickey-friendly thing we'll go out on for a few moments. Here we go.
Yes.